Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Tuesday, November 25th, 2025, and today we are discussing the tool that actually measures compaction, hay days, and some crimes of Trashin. That's a pun I'm proud of. That's embarrassing, but I am. So let's do it. All right, everyone, welcome to Tilth Tuesday. Every Tuesday this year is brought to you by our friends at Tilth Soil, and it's officially their pre-sale season for 2026. So check that out at tilthsoil.com/farmers to get a pretty sweet deal on potting mix for next season. Link will be in the show notes. Quick reminder that I will be live tomorrow, once again, for our monthly YouTube live session to chat about whatever soccer things you want to chat about, or farming, I guess. You all guide the conversation there. Let's see. This week, yesterday, in fact, I planted some spinach. Now, I don't normally plant spinach at this time of year, necessarily, but I had a little length of the tunnel open because I pulled some of the carrots that were there earlier than I'd originally planned, and I wanted something, growing there until the spring. So spinach is my go-to for that in that situation because it's easy to plant, grows pretty readily in the cold, and it's easy to get rid of if need be. We'll see how that goes, if I can get some good spinach late in the winter. But gonna try some earlier than normal carrot plantings too. But I honestly chickened out a little bit yesterday. I usually wait until January for tunnel carrot sowing, but yesterday I was like, what if I didn't? My thought is it would just be about protecting them, the little, youngins, from, for the harsh colds of January. But actually, now that I'm saying it out loud, it sounds a little bit like a horrible idea. But I also am still going to try it because I just want to know how they would do, for science. Okay, so moving on, I have done some segments on hay in the past, but let's talk a little bit about hay in a bit more in depth to keep up with our mulch series that I may continue until the end of the year, just because, there are a lot of mulch things to discuss out there. So first, it's important to understand what hay is. Hay is grass-cut green that is generally intended for winter feed for livestock. The idea is that you are cutting the grass when it still has some protein in it and drying it down in an effort to supplement the winter feed with that dry preserved grass. And in fact, it's that protein that makes it attractive as a mulch because that provides the nitrogen and other nutrients that the soil and plants can use to grow. If it can feed your livestock, in other words, over the winter, it can certainly do the same for your soil. However, it's grass thing that makes it complicated as a mulch because hay can also mean grass seeds, which you don't really want in your garden. So I just want to stop there and say that I am not recommending hay, generally speaking. Hay requires a lot of thoughtful consideration to employ in a garden. So please do not run out and buy hay as your mulch until you have really planned it out. All right, with that caveat complete, we have used hay almost every season, except for this last season, weirdly. But we have also used it in very specific ways when we do employ it. The first is that we use hay exclusively where we plan to plant long season crops. So that would be like potatoes, tomatoes, sweet potatoes, peppers, garlic, corn, stuff that's going to be in the ground for a very long time. We do not use hay where we basically ever intend to plant things like carrots or lettuces or radish, stuff that you have to sow into the ground and kind of hope that it doesn't get weedy. Mostly we want to use hay where we plan to use hay again and again, and where we do not plan to direct seed anything except cover crops, probably ever again in that lifetime of that bed. This is indeed largely due to the weed seeds. So what that may look like is that we plant our garlic, mulch it with hay, harvest in late June, mow any weeds that came up, mulch it again with hay, and then transplant our winter squash, something like that. Then maybe we pull the mulch aside in the fall and plant cover crops, or just sow a cover crop right there over top of the hay and mow it in. Something like crimson clover works pretty well for this. Rye works okay, depends on how thick we went with the hay and how wet it is and all those things. Anyway, another rotation might be to, pull the mulch from the previous season aside, like into the pathways, plant potatoes, cultivate and hill those potatoes, and then remulch that potato bed with hay. In the late summer, harvest the potatoes, mulch again, and then plant maybe like some fall brassicas or something like that. So you see the soil is never really reliant on being bare enough to have, any sort of significant weed issues from the hay. And if the mulch is adequately thick, weeds are rarely an issue. We typically could find good non-sprayed square bales of hay from, like the $4 to $5 range a bale. And it would take about 7 of those to cover a 40 by 50 foot bed. So that's like 200 square feet plus 75 square feet of pathways. So 275 total. That's a good, if not a little bit wonky equation if you need one, though it may have to be adjusted depending on the width of your paths. Yes, we have on occasion gone too thin with our hay mulching, which results in weeds coming through, but rarely a ton. And when we coupled it with cover crops, say like rye vetch, killed and then mulched over with hay in the spring, then we rarely had issues. It's really just about mulching thick enough and then remulching and then never relying on bareness of any sort. Of course, that was all dry farmed areas for us, so moisture was key, and nowhere, honestly, on our farm was the moisture better. No matter what mulch we used, nowhere was it better than where we managed it with hay. Hay just has a really good knack for keeping in moisture in droughts and that sort of stuff. We know that if you're dry farming, hay mulch can increase yields of potatoes. That's according to studies, especially in drier seasons. This is largely due to better moisture management. That's really what it comes down to. Though the other thing, obviously, that happens is much happier soil from all those nutrients and moisture and carbon colliding with microbes. Now, my ideal would be something like alfalfa or fresh grass clippings, or maybe even, some hay silage where cover crops are grown and then cut before seeding to maximize their protein amounts. Usually, this is what you see for dairies, but that is less common and probably going to be significantly more expensive than most hay that you can get. And I do recommend going back and listening to the sourcing episode that I did relatively recently, I think. I'll link that. For me, hay is something we have access to in Kentucky, and I trust our supplier, but others will not have the same trust or be able to find it affordably. So yeah, that's what makes all this farming stuff so fun and complicated. If I could just say, use this one mulch this way, then we'd all be able to do this exactly the same. But that would be too easy. Touche nature. All right. Let me know your thoughts on hay, or how you've used it or how you don't use it, or maybe even good stories, bad stories, all of the above. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, the tool that measures compaction, and then what? BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by High Mowing Organic Seeds. High Mowing Organic Seeds is celebrating their 30th anniversary with 47 fabulous new varieties for 2026. Highlights include downy mildew-resistant cucumbers, a poppy that looks like cotton candy, and 12 new tomato varieties. High Mowing offers more than 750 varieties of certified organic, non-GMO vegetables, flowers, herbs, and cover crops, all trialed for optimal performance in organic growing systems. High Mowing has the professional quality seeds and supportive grower reps to get you from seed to harvest. Visit highmowingseeds.com to request a catalog and use code 26NOTILL, all one word, 26NOTILL, for 10% off your order of $100 or more. That's highmowingseeds.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Farmhand. Farmers who partnered with Farmhand say they grew an average of 63% this year because it's more than software. Farmhand is your business coach and assistant, helping to sell out, save time, and grow smarter with real data from real farms, shaping websites that convert, campaigns that sell, and fulfillment systems that run smoothly. Curious what that looks like? Meet the founder, Ari, at farmhand.partners/no-till and see the same insights and support the fastest growing farms rely on every week. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at no-tillgrowers.com. Does this show bring you $2 worth of value every month? $5 worth of value every month? You can show it over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where I will try to get to questions from anywhere the questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Scott Fries, who asks, quote, "Hello, Jesse. I know you have covered soil compaction and using rebar. I recently attended a Land Trust Alliance rally, and I won a penetrometer from American Farmland Trust. Could you speak about using this tool, how to reduce compaction deep down if/when found? I would like to learn to use and share this tool with local growers. I am in Ohio, Zone 6B with heavy clay. Thanks in advance for the info. P.S. One of my favorite parts of this channel is your humor beside the wealth of knowledge." End quote. All right. Thank you, Scott. Love it. Cool to hear that you won a penetrometer. That's fun. And that you actually think this show is funny. That makes the two of us, which I think is enough for a show. Anyway, I give the penetrometer a lot of grief as a tool because, like I said, it's a job that can largely be done with a piece of rebar checking your compaction. But to back up for a second, A penetrometer is a tool that is mostly used by agronomists and researchers to measure compaction precisely where, at the depth, the compaction exists and the degree to which that compaction exists. They usually come with a couple different tips to adjust for soil type and moisture. And if you're doing research on compaction or decompaction, it would give you exact measurements to work with. Researchers, in other words, can't just use rebar to check for compaction. However, because rebar works fine for the average person, I don't recommend the penetrometer generally for the average farmer because it's, I don't know, somewhere between $100 and $200, and it's just overkill. But it does work. And if you have one or have access to one, then by all means, rock that thing. Now, managing deep compaction is tricky, but it depends on a little on what you want to do with that space and how deep exactly we're talking about the compaction layers. Heavy compaction can cause a lot of issues in the soil. So if we're talking about heavy compaction at 4 to 8 inches or even, 10 inches or even a foot, maybe, that's not great. 4 to 8 inches is the most important part of the soil horizon for vegetable growers, as that is the area that we call the rhizosphere, where the majority of your soil life resides. So you don't want that area heavily compacted at all, because then the microbes won't be able to get around. It will trap water and cause anaerobic conditions, will keep your roots from being able to penetrate deep enough. And so you will need to address that as rapidly as possible. That could mean a subsoiler, perhaps on a larger scale, or working compost into the soil, and or a plan to broad fork multiple times in the first season, and then until the compaction is just relieved. It could take 6 months, it could take a year, it could take 5 years, who knows. If the compaction is lower than that, then your options do change a little bit. There is less pressure to immediately remediate deep compaction, because although yes, it can have an effect on plant growth, it's not going to be quite as pronounced as compaction that is in that 4 to 10 inch range arbitrarily, like 10 to 25 centimeters. That is where you have to be the most concerned with compaction, just because you can just see a lot of the products of that compaction, affecting plants with diseases and pests and all that stuff. So, like I said, with deeper compaction, a subsoiler on a larger scale or a broad fork on a smaller scale is a good place to start, especially when coupled with compost. I really want to make sure to emphasize that part. The compost should be dropping into the holes that you're creating with the subsoiler or with the broad fork or whatever, especially with clay soils as you use that tool, or the relief will be exceedingly slow. So add the compost and then broad fork or subsoil, allowing that compost to just fill in behind. Living plant roots are the next part of the equation. Things like rye and vetch are great options, but so too can tillage radish and other cover crops be. Regular plant roots will eventually help, but those longer season crops will do a lot more good for you just because they have more time to get deeper in the soil. Then moisture. Good moisture will be essential for getting that deep root penetration that you need. If you don't irrigate it well or you don't manage your moisture well, it just won't break apart quite as easily. Anyway, them's the basics. It's not super complicated, but it can take longer on certain soils than others, so just be patient and consistent. If you do it well, 1 year with broad forking and cover cropping, and then not the next year, it may revert back a little bit, but you will see positive effects. So just keep up with it. Anyway, I hope that was somewhat helpful. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, trash crimes. Be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud supporter of Growers Daily. At Johnny's, they do more than sell seeds. They grow them. They trial them to see how they perform on Johnny's research farm in Maine and across the U.S. and Canada. Only the best varieties are added to their catalog and website. When you need proven varieties you can count on and detailed guidance from seedling to harvest, consider Johnny's your trusted growing partner. JohnnySeeds.com. That's JohnnySeeds.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Marble Seed. The Marble Seed Organic Farming Conference attracts a wide range of regenerative and organic farmers for 3 days of skill development and community building. Farmer Drew Kramer said, "Going to Marble Seed was so invigorating at a time when I needed it most. I picked up tools I'm already using." The conference is the final week in February in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Early registration opens December 4th at conference.marbleseed.org. That's conference.marbleseed.org. All right, back to the show. So I came across this article in the New York Times about this giant pile of trash that was discovered next to a highway in Britain. Basically, it seems some group was illegally dumping millions of pounds of trash right next to this highway about 60 miles northwest of London. And when I say right next to the highway, I mean there is a highway, a couple lines of trees, a giant pile of trash, and another couple of lines of trees. So it wasn't really visible, but it was right up against the highway. More devastatingly, at the head of this long, giant pile of trash is a river that itself flows into the River Thames. Now, apparently, illegal dumping is a massive problem in the UK, with millions of tons being illegally dumped every year. And it's kind of stunning just how much garbage got dumped there in a single year, that now that the trees are losing their leaves is getting revealed to the local populations. For sure, this is an awful thing, 100%. But it also shouldn't just be about the crime. It is rare that we have to look at the amount of trash we collectively produce, the mountain of waste we all produce on a yearly basis, waste that has to be shipped off or buried, but by and large, we never really have to look at. We never really have to see that part. It's just jaw-dropping. Trash is a very out-of-sight, out-of-mind sort of thing for us. I've told the story about being stuck behind a truck, a trash truck on the block, like a single block in Brooklyn one time. It was just floored at how much trash was dumped into the truck in a single block in a single city in the US alone. It is hard to wrap one's brain around this sort of stuff. In no way am I condoning what those criminals did. And of course, I don't live in the UK and can't comment on how big or bad of a problem this sort of illegal dumping is there or anywhere else. But we can't pretend that all of our trash, my own included, isn't ending up in a pile like this somewhere in the world. It's just that we don't usually have to look at it. We can't pretend there isn't some land somewhere absorbing our convenience, and that those efforts won't affect those local populations and eventually ourselves again. The idea that this pile of trash, which could have come from London, it's not clear where the trash originated, but it goes and gets dumped by a river that itself flows into a larger river that itself flows back into London. I mean, the metaphor there sort of writes itself. I guess my question or point, if I have one in talking about this, is would we be so wasteful in a world where we have to look at the waste we create in mass like that? Would we use so much energy, looking at you, AI, if we had to put data centers on main streets next to the power plants they require? And not just like off in some rural area where we never have to look at it and those local folks will just have to deal with it. Again, crime is crime. It should be punished, but crimes also teach us things. They teach us about the vulnerabilities and failures in our systems, sure, but they also are a reflection of who we are and what we value. In this case, we value waste, but we don't want to look at it or think about what it does to our land. We are actively paying people to just take it away, get it out of our sight. In that way, this giant pile of garbage is as much an art installation as a crime scene. And it's one I think we all should not avert our eyes from. Anyway, not trying to pick on my English friends at all. That could have just as well been us in the US or any other country. And frankly, is all of the developed world. But I don't know. What say you all? Otherwise, we're going to call it a Tuesday and get ready for our live tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern USA time. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. If you need one of those end-of-the-year tax breaks, this is the way to do it. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors, and if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. She's been doing a huge amount of work this week, so make sure you should just send her a nice thank you email because she's got a huge project going on. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat like the one I'm wearing or the ones I'm not wearing that Mike is showing on the screen, or a copy of my book, The Living Soul Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. The holidays are coming up. You better jump on that if you want them there by the holidays. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of November, the waning month of November, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Robin Garner, Steel Road Farms, and Andrew Roulette, which is probably Jackson. Unless there's another Andrew Roulette in the world. So shouts to Jackson. So as you will remember from yesterday's story, Mildred, who was annoyed at the number of times her plans to go see her favorite play on Broadway in New York City were thwarted by some attack or another. And anyway, Mildred decided to just go to New York and do something about it. Be the change you want to see and all that good stuff. But here's the thing. Mildred isn't any old Mildred. She is Mildred McQuills, a Midwestern butcher, grew up on a farm and went swimming one day in a stream when she was a kid. Little Mildred did not know that the factory upstream was dumping toxic goo into the water that day. And Mildred, well, she got really sick first, and then things started to change for Mildred. And that is for, well, in this case, it'll be for Friday. on Mildred Ain't Messin'. Mildred Ain't Messin'. Yep. All right. Thanks for watching and/or listening. We will see you tomorrow for a live show. Yeah. Bye.